They said it would never happen. An American automaker, standing up to the most powerful man in the country? Impossible. But General Motors just made a move that blindsided everyone, and Trump's furious reaction is just the beginning. For decades, General Motors has been a pillar of American manufacturing, shaping industries and setting standards. But in a stunning turn, the company has rewritten the rules, making a decision that could reshape the future of the auto industry. This is not just about one company. It's about power, control, and the battle for economic dominance. Did General Motors just outplay Trump? Will other automakers follow? And most importantly, how will this impact you? Stick around, because what happens next will change everything. What GM did to trigger Trump's wrath? General Motors made a decision that sent a clear message. It was prioritizing global expansion over the nationalist agenda Trump had spent years reinforcing. The company announced a major shift in production, increasing its reliance on international manufacturing while aggressively expanding its electric vehicle initiatives. This meant not just investing in new technologies, but also moving operations away from traditional American factories, something that Trump had vowed to prevent. For a president who built his economic vision on bringing jobs back to American soil, this was a direct slap in the face. This was not a decision made overnight. General Motors had been strategically planning this move for years, quietly setting up the infrastructure needed to secure its place in the global auto market. The rise of electric vehicles had changed the rules of the game, and the company knew that to compete with global leaders, it had to think beyond borders. The investments in international factories were not just about reducing costs. They were about securing access to key materials, diversifying supply chains, and staying ahead in the race toward electrification. This was a future-focused decision, and General Motors was willing to take the risk. The company framed its decision as a necessary evolution, emphasizing the importance of innovation in an increasingly competitive world. Supporters of the move argued that it was about survival, that if General Motors did not expand internationally, it would fall behind. But for Trump and his base, the reasoning did not matter. What mattered was the message this sent to American workers. It was not just about economics, it was about loyalty. And for Trump, there was only one way to respond. Trump's furious reaction, how he tried to fight back. Trump did not hold back. Within hours of General Motors' announcement, he was on the offensive, launching a series of public statements, interviews, and social media posts condemning the company. He called it a disgrace, accused General Motors of abandoning the American worker, and vowed that they would regret their decision. At a rally, he doubled down, rallying his supporters with a claim that corporate greed was once again undermining the very foundation of the nation's economy. Trump's frustration was not just about a single company's decision, it was about the broader implications. If General Motors, one of the most iconic American manufacturers, could make such a move, what was stopping others from following? His administration scrambled to explore options to pressure the company into reversing its course. Tariffs were on the table, as were potential regulatory penalties that could make it harder for General Motors to do business within the United States. The White House wanted to send a message, and they were willing to go to war with one of America's biggest corporations to do it. Despite the aggressive rhetoric, there were limits to what Trump could do. His administration had tools at its disposal, but the reality was that General Motors was playing a different game, one built on long-term strategy rather than short-term political influence. The company had positioned itself in a way that made retaliation difficult, using its global reach as a shield. The more Trump fought back, the clearer it became that this was not just about a single battle. It was about a fundamental shift in how major corporations were beginning to operate in a politically divided world. As Trump escalated his threats, General Motors remained steady. The company was not backing down. Instead, it was about to turn the tables in a way that even Trump had not foreseen. GM's bold counterattack. Why they're not backing down. General Motors did not just weather the storm. It fought back. Rather than apologizing or attempting to soften its stance, the company doubled down on its commitment to a global electric future. Through carefully crafted statements, media appearances, and corporate messaging, General Motors framed its decision as a bold, necessary step for the industry and the economy. The company positioned itself as a leader of innovation, a business that was not just reacting to market trends but shaping them. In response to Trump's accusations, General Motors reminded the public of its continued investments in American jobs and infrastructure. The company pointed to billions in research and development funding, new technology hubs, and efforts to transition workers into the electric vehicle sector. This was not about abandoning the country. It was about adapting to the future. The auto industry was changing, and General Motors was making sure it would not be left behind. The strategy worked. While Trump's base remained loyal to his message, many industry experts and economic analysts sided with General Motors. They saw the move as a forward-thinking decision that would secure the company's place in the global economy. Investors, too, reacted favorably, seeing the long-term potential in General Motors' aggressive push toward electric vehicle dominance. The debate had now shifted. It was no longer about whether General Motors was betraying the country. It was about whether Trump's economic policies were outdated in a rapidly evolving world. Just when it seemed like the conflict had reached its peak, another twist emerged. General Motors was not the only company making this kind of move. Other automakers were watching closely, and some were preparing to follow suit. The battle that started as a standoff between Trump and General Motors was about to become something much bigger. And as the fight intensified, the future of American manufacturing hung in the balance. The ripple effect, what this means for other automakers. General Motors' move sent an unmistakable message across the industry, and the ripple effect was impossible to ignore. Ford, Toyota, and Tesla all watched the unfolding battle between the automaker and the White House, realizing that whatever happened next could set a precedent for the entire industry. Each company had its own challenges to consider, but one thing was clear: General Motors had just altered the course of American car manufacturing. Ford had already been struggling to find a balance between profitability and domestic loyalty. The company had made headlines for its heavy investment in electric vehicles, while still maintaining production lines in countries that provided cost advantages. The moment General Motors made its move, Ford executives faced a dilemma. Would they double down on their American factories to appease policymakers, or would they quietly expand overseas to stay competitive? Toyota, on the other hand, had long mastered the art of international manufacturing. With plants in the United States and abroad, the company had positioned itself to remain unaffected by short-term political shifts. But even Toyota executives knew that a major shift in U.S. policy could impact supply chains, and that made the General Motors showdown a moment worth studying. Then there was Tesla. Unlike traditional automakers, Tesla had built its empire by controlling nearly every aspect of its production, from battery manufacturing to direct sales. Tesla had already invested in plants outside the United States, but General Motors' move reinforced one undeniable truth: the future of the auto industry would not be dictated by old rules. If tariffs, political pressure, and economic policies started interfering with business, Tesla's existing infrastructure might give it a significant advantage. But the corporate reaction was only one side of the equation. Unions and workers had their own concerns. Across the country, employees who had spent decades working in auto manufacturing saw this as yet another warning sign. Would this decision lead to more outsourcing? Would it mark the beginning of a permanent shift that put profits over jobs? Union leaders took to the airwaves, demanding reassurances that General Motors and other automakers would not abandon the American workforce entirely. Workers staged protests, arguing that if companies continued shifting production elsewhere, it could devastate entire communities. But others saw this as an inevitable transition. Technology was reshaping the industry, and many believed that rather than resisting change, the workforce needed to adapt. It was a growing divide that placed corporate interests and labor rights in direct opposition. As the dust settled on these debates, it became evident that this was not just a battle between General Motors and the White House. It was a defining moment that highlighted a much bigger issue: the widening rift between government and corporate America. For years, companies had expanded beyond national borders, building supply chains that transcended traditional economic boundaries. Now, with the president determined to force businesses back onto American soil, that global mindset was being challenged. Some automakers feared that standing against political pressure could result in consequences they were not prepared for, while others saw this as an opportunity to reshape policies in their favor. But Trump was not done yet. His next move would shake Wall Street. Trump's counterstrike, how he tried to crush GM. What started as a corporate decision quickly escalated into a full-scale economic battle. Trump, furious over what he saw as a betrayal by an American icon, retaliated in the most aggressive way possible. He announced a 200% tariff on all General Motors imports, a move that sent shockwaves through the financial world. It was a declaration of economic warfare, one designed to force the company into submission. The White House framed the move as a defense of American jobs, but investors, economists, and industry leaders saw it for what it was, a high-stakes gamble that could have far-reaching consequences. The immediate reaction was panic. The auto industry relied on complex supply chains that spanned multiple countries, and a tariff of this magnitude meant skyrocketing costs. Suddenly, General Motors was faced with a dilemma. Would it absorb the losses or pass them on to consumers? Meanwhile, other automakers braced for impact, fearing they could be the next targets if they did not comply with the White House's demands. The markets responded instantly. General Motors' stock plummeted, dragging down other automakers with it. Investors began pulling back, worried that this conflict could disrupt the entire sector. Economic analysts predicted higher car prices, fewer options for consumers, and potential layoffs if companies were forced to restructure their operations. But despite the chaos, General Motors remained calm. Behind closed doors, the company's executives had already prepared for this possibility. They knew that a conflict with the White House carried risks, and they had been quietly working on a plan to neutralize Trump's retaliation. It was a calculated move that ensured they would not only survive the storm but emerge stronger than ever. As the dust settled, the auto industry realized something remarkable. General Motors was not backing down, and they had a strategy that could shift the balance of power in their favor. GM's secret weapon, how they outsmarted Trump. What Trump had not anticipated was just how prepared General Motors had been for this exact scenario. Before the White House had even issued its tariff threats, the company had already repositioned key aspects of its supply chain, making it nearly impossible for the administration to inflict serious damage. General Motors had strategically spread its operations across different regions, ensuring that no single country could cripple its ability to manufacture and sell vehicles. By diversifying production, the company had effectively made itself immune to any single economic policy change. Trump's tariffs might hurt, but they would not be enough to bring General Motors to its knees. Beyond manufacturing, General Motors had another powerful advantage: its relationships with international governments and trade organizations. While Trump was attempting to pressure the company into submission, General Motors was strengthening its alliances with foreign markets that could offset any losses from American tariffs. The company's global reach meant that even if one region became hostile, there were other markets ready to pick up the slack. General Motors had positioned itself as more than just an American company. It had become a global powerhouse that no single administration could control. There was also the issue of consumer demand. While Trump was pushing for a return to traditional manufacturing, General Motors was betting on the future. The company had made massive investments in electric vehicles, securing supply chains that prioritized long-term sustainability. This meant that while Trump's policies were focused on immediate economic battles, General Motors was looking years ahead. The automaker was not just fighting to survive in the moment, it was preparing to dominate the industry in the future. With the automaker proving resilient, attention began shifting elsewhere. Investors were now asking the most important question of all. If General Motors was weathering the storm, where should they place their bets? The fight between Trump and General Motors had quickly become a financial battleground, and Wall Street was taking sides. Trump versus corporate America, this fight is bigger than just General Motors. It would be a mistake to think that this battle between General Motors and Donald Trump is an isolated case. In reality, it is just the latest round in a war that has been brewing for years. Before General Motors, other corporations found themselves in the crosshairs of a president who built his political brand on taking on big business. From technology giants to manufacturing behemoths, Trump has never shied away from calling out corporate leaders, sometimes igniting market-shaking disputes that go far beyond any single company. Amazon felt it first when Trump launched repeated attacks on its founder, accusing the company of unfair business practices and its impact on small retailers. Then there was Google, a company that faced public scrutiny after Trump suggested it was suppressing conservative viewpoints. The pattern was clear. Any corporation that did not align with Trump's economic vision became a target. General Motors was simply the next in line, but unlike tech companies, it stood at the heart of an industry that Trump had vowed to protect. At its core, this fight is much bigger than one automaker. It is a clash between two opposing forces shaping the future of American industry: populist politics and corporate globalization. Trump has championed an America-first agenda, focusing on keeping jobs within national borders and punishing companies that outsource production. However, large corporations operate on a different playing field, one that is defined by international markets, cost-cutting strategies, and the need to remain competitive on a global scale. General Motors, like many multinational corporations, understands that staying profitable requires tapping into international labor and supply chains. In today's economy, manufacturing is no longer confined by national borders. Instead, companies optimize operations across multiple countries, sourcing materials where they are cheapest and producing goods where labor costs are lower. This strategy is not just about maximizing profits. It is about survival in an increasingly interconnected world. Trump's battle with General Motors highlights the growing dilemma for American businesses. Can they follow their financial interests while maintaining loyalty to domestic workers? Or will they be forced to choose sides in a political war where economic decisions have become personal? The answer may not be simple, but one thing is certain: the impact of this battle will not be limited to boardrooms and political rallies. It will affect millions of people in ways they never expected. The repercussions of this conflict go beyond corporate policies and political rhetoric. It is not just about the decisions made in executive suites or government offices. This fight is about something much more immediate, something that hits closer to home for millions of Americans. It is about the cost of the vehicles they drive, the jobs they rely on, and the economic future they will have to navigate. The consumer fallout, how it affects you for everyday Americans, the consequences of this battle will be felt in a very real way. When General Motors made the decision to shift more production overseas, it was not just a corporate maneuver. It was a decision that could change the price of vehicles in dealerships across the country. With Trump retaliating by threatening heavy tariffs on General Motors imports, the financial burden is likely to land squarely on the shoulders of the consumer. If these tariffs go into effect, the price of new vehicles could skyrocket. It would not just be General Motors cars that become more expensive. The ripple effect could impact the entire auto market. Competing automakers may face similar pressures, leading to an overall increase in prices across the industry. That means whether someone is buying a vehicle from General Motors, Ford, or Toyota, they may find themselves paying more than ever before. Beyond higher prices, there is another problem looming in the shadows: supply chain disruptions. General Motors' pivot to international production means that key components, such as batteries for electric vehicles and advanced electronic systems, will be sourced from outside the country. If tariffs increase or trade agreements shift, delays could become more frequent, and consumers may face longer wait times when ordering new vehicles. While some Americans are outraged by General Motors' move, others see it as a necessary step for the company to remain competitive. This divide is creating an unusual split in public opinion. On one side, there are those who believe that automakers should prioritize American workers and keep production within the country, even if it means higher costs. On the other side, there are those who recognize the realities of a global market and see General Motors' decision as a business necessity, not a betrayal. For consumers, the debate boils down to a difficult choice. Should they continue to support an American brand that is increasingly relying on overseas production? Or should they turn to competitors that are also navigating the same economic landscape? The decision may not be straightforward, but the reality is unavoidable. The battle between General Motors and Trump is reshaping the auto industry, and in the process, it is changing the way people buy and think about vehicles. As this conflict unfolds, something unexpected is happening. Just when it seemed like the debate had settled into two opposing camps, another player has entered the scene, a company that is not just changing the way vehicles are built but redefining the entire industry. And its presence in this fight, that is where things take an even more dramatic turn. Global implications. Is this the end of American economic dominance? For decades, the United States has set the pace for the global automotive industry, leading in innovation, production, and technological advancements. American automakers have long dictated the future of car manufacturing, but General Motors' latest move signals a shift that other global powers are eager to exploit. While General Motors looks beyond national borders, rivals across the world are positioning themselves to take advantage of this transition. China, already a dominant force in electric vehicle production, is moving aggressively to fill the gap. With government-backed subsidies and massive infrastructure investments, Chinese automakers are scaling operations faster than any American company. Companies like BYD and NIO are producing electric vehicles at a fraction of the cost while advancing battery technology at a rate few in the United States can match. China's supply chains are streamlined, raw materials are sourced domestically, and the country's consumer base is embracing the shift toward electrification at an unprecedented pace. General Motors' move has created an opening, and China is wasting no time in expanding its influence into North America and Europe. Europe is taking a different but equally aggressive approach. With strict environmental regulations and a government-led push towards sustainability, European automakers have spent years preparing for an electric future. Brands like Volkswagen, Renault, and BMW have positioned themselves as leaders in electric mobility, receiving strong government incentives to keep production within their borders. If American automakers continue shifting operations elsewhere, they may find themselves shut out of European markets in favor of homegrown competitors that are already aligned with strict regulatory standards. For the first time, American automakers are not just competing against rival companies. They are up against entire nations with government-backed strategies aimed at securing global dominance. This is no longer just about building the best car. It is about shaping the future of the auto industry at a geopolitical level. While General Motors moves toward a globally integrated approach, its competitors are doubling down on securing economic control. The consequences extend beyond the auto industry. Manufacturing has long been a cornerstone of the American economy, supporting millions of workers and serving as a key driver of technological progress. But if corporations continue prioritizing global efficiency over domestic production, the nation may face a broader economic shift, one that could mark the end of its industrial leadership. And if the United States does not act fast, it could lose more than just jobs. It could lose its entire edge in the global marketplace. The unexpected winners, who's actually benefiting from this conflict? While General Motors and political leaders engage in a high-stakes battle, others are quietly reaping the rewards. The shift toward electric vehicles has already transformed the industry, but recent events have created unexpected winners, many of whom are thriving under the chaos. Suppliers specializing in battery production, semiconductor chips, and electric vehicle components are experiencing a surge in demand. Companies that were once hidden in the background, manufacturing essential materials for automakers, are now some of the most valuable players in the industry. With General Motors securing long-term contracts with global partners, suppliers of lithium-ion batteries and rare earth metals are seeing record profits. This has sparked a wave of investment into resource extraction, battery recycling, and next-generation energy storage solutions, sectors that are now at the center of the automotive world. Startups in the electric vehicle space are also emerging as unexpected beneficiaries. While legacy automakers struggle with political backlash and restructuring, companies like Rivian and Lucid Motors are capitalizing on the moment. Investors are pouring billions into these brands, seeing them as more agile and less burdened by outdated corporate structures. As General Motors and other traditional automakers fight political battles, these startups are pushing forward with innovation, expanding market share, and gaining consumer confidence. Even within American politics, some leaders are supporting General Motors' strategy, viewing it as an essential step for survival rather than a betrayal. Their argument is simple: embracing globalization does not mean abandoning American workers. Instead, it ensures long-term growth, strengthens research and development at home, and allows automakers to remain competitive in a world that is rapidly changing. If American companies do not expand globally, they risk falling behind. Meanwhile, Wall Street is reacting in ways that few anticipated. Initial fears of tariffs and political tension sent General Motors stock into volatility, but seasoned investors saw an opportunity. Those who understand the long-term implications of the electric transition are buying in while others hesitate, positioning themselves for future gains as the market stabilizes. Foreign automakers and electric startups are also attracting capital, as investors shift their confidence toward companies leading the charge in innovation. But while some are profiting, others are about to face their biggest challenge yet. The automotive industry is being reshaped in real time, and not everyone will survive the transition. But what do you think? Let's know in the comments, and thanks for watching.